All right. Well, welcome everyone to the next installment of our Appalachian Natural History seminar series and to class. I hope you're all doing well on this fine Monday. We are joined today by Michael French, who is the Director of Operations at Green Forest's Work. Green Forest's Work is a nonprofit that you've heard about to some extent already in class. They plant trees on reclaimed surface mines throughout Appalachia and the world. They have a Australian operation that maybe you'll tell us more about. And they are the group that we're planting trees with on Saturday. So very much looking forward to that trip. And Michael, I think we'll share a little bit more about that as well. So Michael did a master's degree here at UK just a couple years ago with, I
was on the 10-year program.
Several years ago. He did finished a master's degree with Dr. Chris Barton, who we talked about a couple times in class. I was also my major professor. And you've been at GFW informally since its beginning, but you took over as Director of Operations in 2015. So been there for a while. And you are an expert in surface mine reforestation and nonprofit running and grant writing and many other things in the American chestnut. So without further ado, you want to take it away? Feel free to say a little bit more about yourself and your kind of academic journey, if you would like to, and we will jump right in. Okay, awesome. Should be good, and then big.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Sena. I'll probably flip-flop back and forth between Kenton and Dr. Sena. I meant him as Kenton. We have mutual interests, and I met him as Kenton, and a lot of times I revert to how I met somebody, but it's been great working with him over the years on American chestnut restoration and surface mine reforestation as well. But like he said, I'm Michael French. I'm Director of Operations for Green Forest's Work. It's a nonprofit that we started here at the University of Kentucky to further the restoration of healthy, productive forests on formerly mined lands across the Appalachian region and now across the globe. And it was started at the Forestry Department by Dr. Chris Barton, and it's something that we've really been scaling up, and there's a great need for it. But in this presentation, I was going to give you a little bit of the history of reforestation on surface mines, kind of differentiate between what types of mining and what's going on in the reforestation world, and then get into what we're doing on the legacy mines. And Dr. Sena told me that you all are familiar with the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act a bit, some of the forestry reclamation approach and areas. So I'm going to breeze through these first slides, and then I'll get into what Green Forest's Work is doing in the second half of the presentation. And I'd also like to apologize for my attire. Usually I kind of dress up for something like this, but I've been slinging bags of trees around all day today. And you all will understand on Saturday when you come out with us and plant trees. So when you do come out on Saturday, make sure you wear sturdy footwear, be prepared to get muddy, wear older clothes that you don't care too much about because it's a dirty job out there planting these trees. We're going to try and plant about 900,000 trees this year, which will be in Appalachia, 900,000 trees, about 1.1 million, including 200,000 in Australia, which will be our biggest year so far. And last year was our biggest year, our record-breaking year to date in terms of trees and acreage planted. And we planted about 760,000 last year, so we've really been scaling up. And I gave you all our previous report from 2020. Just feel free to read it afterwards to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. But before the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act was passed, reforestation was really common on surface mines across the Appalachian region. And that was done either through planting or just natural regeneration, where the mines would just dump material, seeds would blow into the area or be dispersed by animals, and trees would pop up. In a lot of cases, the trees did very well, as you can tell from these black walnuts in southern Indiana or these white oak in southern Illinois. In fact, researchers found that some of the most productive sites for growing white oak in the entire state of Illinois were on old coal mines. Also, these loblolly pine out in western Kentucky, they've been harvesting saw timber off of some of these mines for years now. So reforestation was commonplace, but there were a lot of other problems with reclamation and restoration of mined lands. before the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act was passed. It was left up to the states. Some states had more strict laws. Some states had, more lenient laws. Some states had no laws at all. So there were a lot of human safety and environmental issues during that period. I know you saw this slide in Dr. Angel's presentation where they had just pushed all of that exploded rock off of the side of the hill and created a huge landslide. This was fairly commonplace. There was also massive erosion and sedimentation of streams. Hazardous landforms were sometimes left in place. Sometimes mining companies would leave toxic or acid-producing material on the surface. This is a site that I visited in Pennsylvania, and it's looked like this since probably about the 1930s. This is highly acidic material, leaching metals and other things into the downstream watershed. The pH of a similar site where I took soil samples from it was 2.79. So you can imagine how bad that is. And it's just been leaching there for nearly 100 years now. How do I know that? Well, the records on this site were lost, but there were actually American chestnuts growing in some of this area. So they would have had to have been reproducing at the time for that to regenerate there. But there were no paper records and nobody knew who mined it or when or anything else. So the federal government, Congress passed the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, and their focus really was to address the human health and safety issues that were occurring with surface mining, and also they focused on water quality. They said that mining companies needed to restore the land to approximate original contour. They couldn't leave the cliffs in place or big open pits. They had to declare a post-mining land use in their mining permit. And it required that they put up a monetary bond prior to mining so that if they didn't reclaim the land, the government would have a pool of funding to go to. So what happened with reforestation? When they were restoring an approximate original contour, they started heavily compacting the land to prevent erosion and sedimentation, to keep the material in place. And that inhibits gas exchange in the soils. It leads to flash runoff situations. They also seeded it with those thick, aggressive ground covers that Dr. Angel talked about, and that led to a widespread tree planting failures. This site here is not only poor growth medium selected for it, but it's also highly compacted. They began creating bonsai forests, essentially, just because of the physical and chemical characteristics of a lot of these soils. This is a 7-year-old northern red oak in a traditionally reclaimed mined area. And you can see all the Sericea lespedeza, aggressive legumes all around it. I want you to think about this tree here in a few slides, a 7-year-old northern red oak. But I know you saw this slide as well about the compaction, how they tracked over this area with the bulldozer so many times. This was actually the first permit in West Virginia where they were supposed to stop using this technique. But they were so into that mindset, this is what we've always done, this is what we're going to keep doing, that they just compacted it anyway, so they had to redo that area and loosen it up. This is a contour mine where they had a couple of dozers working together to pack in the slopes. So where once were forests, mining companies, because they couldn't get the trees to grow back, if they had declared forest land as a post-mining land use, they couldn't get their bond money back because the trees wouldn't survive a lot of cases. So instead, they began declaring hay pasture land or unmanaged wildlife habitat or rangeland as their post-mining land use of choice, even when the landowner didn't intend to graze cattle on it or use it for forage crops or anything else. So this became very commonplace. In some areas, if it was unmanaged wildlife habitat, they would plant invasive exotic species like autumn olive because they could tolerate those compacted conditions. They'd produce a berry for birds and some benefits, but now we know what problems these are. So across the Appalachian region, approximately 750,000 to 1 million acres was converted from biodiverse hardwood forests to some other cover type. And it really becomes problematic when a lot of these lands are left unmanaged, because that's when a lot more of the invasive exotic species move in and further hinder the development of native forests. A colleague of mine calls this an arboretum of what not to plant. It's bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, multiflora rose, royal paulownia. Essentially, these are all non-native species that you're looking at here. And non-native species just don't provide the same benefits to our native wildlife that our native trees and shrubs do. Are you all familiar with Doug Tallamy's work at all? Did you talk about it at all? Okay. Doug Tellemy's a professor, and he researched Bradford pears. As you drive around Lexington, you see all these flowering trees on the sides of the roads. That's nature being destroyed is what you're looking at right now. He did a study of caterpillars on Bradford pears versus oaks, and he would walk around and collect every caterpillar at shoulder height or below from Bradford pears, and he found one caterpillar. Then he went around and collected from oaks, and he found hundreds of caterpillars from dozens of different species. Now, why is that important? Well, if you're a chickadee and you're trying to raise a clutch of young, or some sparrows or other things like that, they'll eat thousands of caterpillars just to raise their young. If you don't have any caterpillars, you're not going to have any birds. So it affects the entire food web of some of these species, and we really need to start working on some of these issues. So this map here shows the extent of the coal fields of Appalachia. There are about 1.7 million acres that have been bond released. There are about 700,000 acres currently permitted. That's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's bigger than the state of Delaware, and it's about the size of the two of them combined. It's almost as large as two of them. So it's a significant land resource, but it's scattered all throughout this region from Alabama up into Pennsylvania. So the federal government, recognizing that they had a problem, they started the Appalachian Regional Reforestation Initiative, and their goals were to get the active mining industry planting more trees, getting native forests reestablished, and they did a really good job of that. So now there are basically three categories of mines in the Appalachian region. The active mining industry, they're responsible for the reclamation and reforestation on their active mines. There's the abandoned mine lands from pre-SMACRA, and there's a funding pool to reclaim those areas that's funded by the active mining industry. But then there's what GFW works on, which is the legacy mines, and those are the legacy of SMACRA. But you all went through the FRA, so I'll just breeze through this. Basically, it says leave 4 to 6 feet of the best available growth medium on the surface, avoid compacting it, lightly seed tree compatible ground covers, plant a variety of trees, and use proper tree planting techniques. We know that it works from some of the research. This is Dr. Angel in this photograph right here. This is the Starfire Mine, which you saw earlier. This, if you think back to that other 7-year-old northern red oak that I showed you that was by that guy's boot earlier, these are 7-year-old FRA plots with oaks and poplars and sumac, pines, and all kinds of other native species just flourishing in this area because it was reclaimed using the forestry reclamation approach. This is the Cove site. I don't know if you all have seen this or not. This was a site where a stream reconstruction was done. This is just outside of Robinson Forest as well. But this is a valley fill where they had filled in a headwater stream with rock and put an underdrain through it all. Well, they did a stream reconstruction to restore the natural meander of the stream across the surface of this, and then used FRA techniques on the side slopes. This is the site in 2017. Here's the same site in 2019. So we knew that the FRA worked, you know, based on the research and the applied science that was done following it. But what could be done about this? This is the 750,000 acres to 1 million acres that are in need of reforestation. This is a site that's 35 years old, you know, and there's very little natural regeneration occurring on this site. There's some black locust moving in, which is a native tree. It's a colonizer nitrogen fixer. But a lot of what you see are invasive species encroaching on this area, which will further hinder native forestry establishment. So we established Green Forests Work as a 501c3 to work on these lands, the legacy mine lands that had been reclaimed to hay pasture land or something other than forest land, because there was no longer an obligation on the part of the mining company, state or federal government, or any other entity to do this type of reforestation. And what we do is we implement a modified forestry reclamation approach. So we started as a petition to the White House to stimulate the economy in Appalachia, basically a civilian conservation corps styled program to put Appalachian citizens back to work doing environmental restoration. At the same time that we submitted our proposal to the White House, our contact there, who was the Green Job Czar under Barack Obama, got fired the same week that that proposal was sent to the White House. But the Appalachian Regional Commission saw what we were doing and took notice of it. They loved it and said, hey, we're going to provide you startup funding to start a nonprofit to do this. So we got our 501c3 status in 2013, but like all other nonprofits providing a service that is difficult to monetize, we rely on grants, donations, in-kind contributions, and partnerships to get this work done. And like I said, we worked through a modified version of the forestry reclamation approach. Because we can't select the best available material and put it on the surface, it's already there, it's already been compacted, and the vegetation is already there. Our first step is really to control the unwanted vegetation. And we do that through mechanical or chemical means. And then we have to mitigate that compacted ground. You know, we've got to rip it up with large bulldozers so that the trees have a chance, and it improves the hydrology as well. Then we plant a variety of trees, trying to restore a forest type that would be similar to what was there prior to mining, and use proper tree planting techniques. So this is a photograph of the Rockcastle River Wildlife Management Area in eastern Kentucky. Here we're using a couple of small bulldozers to clear out all of the autumn olive and other Sericea lespedeza, other exotics and unwanted vegetation. We're also taking a couple of inches of not topsoil, but the top overburden that was there to remove the seed bank of the exotic and invasive species. Then we come in with large bulldozers with ripping shanks on the back of them that are 3 or 4 feet long. We rip it, it fluffs everything up. It allows rainwater to infiltrate the soil and be slowly released from the system. So it improves the water budget of these areas as well. But also loosens it up so that the tree roots can easily extend in all directions so that they grow much more vigorously. Then we employ local conservation groups, university clubs, K through 12 students, local volunteers, get the local community involved when we can, and professional tree planters to come out and plant these sites. Here's a group in Pennsylvania. They were working to restore an oak hickory forest type, but also including some American chestnuts in the mix as well. And like I said, we try to plant the reference type of the forest. What was there prior to mining is what we feel should be there after mining, so that it'll eventually blend with the surrounding hillsides. And we favor hard mass species because a lot of species, once we rip it up, expose that bare mineral soil, seeds from trees are going to blow in. They'll establish on their own. We don't really need to plant a lot of those. But for some of these vast open surface mines, it's going to be hard for a squirrel to pick up an acorn or a hickory or a large nut species and carry it all the way out to the middle of that surface mine. So a lot of times we'll focus on those later successional hard mass species to get them there in the understory so that the future forest composition will be what we want it to be. But we also use these sites as opportunities to restore species that have been in decline, such as American chestnut. We planted quite a few of those, probably tens of thousands of them over the years. We planted American elm, which was lost to Dutch elm disease. And we're also trying to restore declining forest types as well. If you read those annual reports that I gave you, we're working to restore shortleaf pine upland oak forest. Shortleaf pine is a species that's been on the decline for decades due to fire suppression, timber harvesting, southern pine beetle outbreaks, disease, and other things. And when we do this, we're also working to restore white oak a lot of times. There's a generalized oak decline has been occurring for decades. And lately, the bourbon industry has been really interested in that because, you know, the bourbon industry, they all use charred white oak barrels, but they can only use them one time. And then they've got to be shipped off for sherry or something else. So they're interested in oak sustainability, and they've been supporting our efforts as well. So what we're doing ties in with other restoration initiatives throughout the region, like the Shortleaf Pine Initiative, the White Oak Initiative, what the American Chestnut Foundation's been doing, and others. And through this work, we're focusing on improving two aspects of Appalachia. I always thought that our mission was kind of twofold. The two E's were improving the environment of Appalachia, but also trying to improve the economic conditions of the area by creating jobs now, but also restoring a forest-based economy. But there's a third E that has always been part of our mission, and I just kind of overlooked it at first as we were trying to build this program, and that's environmental education. And that's kind of why I'm here today. and why you all will be out planting trees with us, you know, in the future as well. But I'm going to talk about both of these. Dr. Sena wanted me to focus on the socioeconomic benefits of this work, but you really don't get the full socioeconomic benefits without the environmental benefits. You know, the two are intertwined, and it's hard sometimes to separate one from the other. So I'm going to talk about both, and then hopefully we can have a discussion and question and answer afterwards. But in restoring ecosystem services on these lands that have been degraded by mining, we're looking at forest habitat restoration. You know, the Appalachian region used to be primarily contiguous forests. You know, there were some openings and things of that nature, but it was forested before. These areas can't be converted to row crop agriculture. They're just too rocky, they're too hilly, they're to erode away. So we feel that the best benefit, not only for the landowners, but also for society at large, is to restore the forests to them for all of the benefits that forests provide to society. So we're looking at, you know, terrestrial animals, but also migratory neotropical songbirds benefit from forest restoration in the Appalachian region. There are songbirds that fly to Central and South America every year and migrate up here for breeding and then back over winter down there. And in doing this work, we're also affecting the water quality and the water quantity that comes off of these sites. So we're trying to restore the hydrology of these lands as well. And we're looking to benefit pollinators as well, not only honeybees, but butterflies and moths and everything else like I had kind of described earlier. But these sites also, when you restore the forest versus these grasslands that have been created out there, they've got a greater surface area than the grasslands, you know, the forests do, and the stems and leaves of the trees and everything else. They're really the lungs of the earth, and they help to filter everything out. So we're improving the air quality of the region and doing these projects. And also, when it comes to mitigating climate change, I really don't feel that there are very many places better to mitigate climate change by planting trees other than these surface mines. Because after they've mined the region, you know, what they do is they go and they cut down all the valuable and marketable timber that they can, sell it off. Everything else gets pushed to the bottom of the hill. It gets bulldozed down there and burned. Then they blow up the mountain, you know, pack all those rocks back in there. And there's really initially very little to no organic carbon in those soils. So when you go back and you reestablish the forest on those areas, not only are they sequestering carbon in their biomass as the trees develop, but when they're shedding leaves and branches and really building the soil, you're locking up that carbon in the soil, and it'll be locked up there so that these areas can serve as carbon sinks for decades, if not centuries. One of the ecological benefits of doing this work is reducing forest fragmentation. You know, forest fragmentation is a real issue. When you have these holes out there in the forest, it allows invasive exotic species to move in at those edges that can then be dispersed into the interior forest, or if there's another opening nearby, or if a natural disturbance like a tornado or wildfire or wind throw happens. So by closing these holes in the forest, we're helping to improve the health and resiliency of the entire forest. This is a site on the Daniel Boone National Forest where we're restoring upland oak shortleaf habitat. This is the same site on the ground. When we went there, you know, there's autumn olive, a few black locust, a few ash, which are going to be lost to the emerald ash borer. We went and cleared all that out, ripped it up. We created a little wetland over there in the corner that you can see, but when you fluff this up, it acts like a big sponge. You know, when you get these storm events, that water can come in, it can be infiltrated in, and it can be slowly released from the system, so you don't get those flash runoff events. So if we can do enough of this work, not only are we improving the water quality that comes off of the site by reducing what's going into streams in terms of, you know, the sedimentation and things of that nature, but also it's going to help people out by mitigating flash flooding events. You know, if we can do enough acreage out there so that we get this additive cumulative effect in these watersheds, that you don't get that flash surface runoff, it can help to buffer some of that flash flooding which is experienced throughout the region. This is a site on the Monongahela National Forest where we've done more than 1,000 acres of red spruce restoration. throughout this area, not only are we ripping up the land, but we're also creating wetlands, deliberately going in there with excavators and other equipment and creating these pools and throwing some of the non-native trees in there as structure for some of the, aquatic insects and salamanders and things of that nature. And we're finding out that these sites are utilized very quickly. It's like, if you build it, they will come, and they're there within the first year. I mean, you can build it, and then a couple of weeks later, you come back and there are these tadpoles in there. And it's like, this is just amazing, but it's great for the entire ecosystem to do this. So that you've got different depths and different sizes so that they're utilized by different types of wildlife throughout the year. And we've created thousands, over 1,000 wetlands throughout that restoration project. And it's also habitat creation. When we go and rip up these areas, it pulls up large bulldozers and things like that. Nature doesn't like a golf course. It doesn't like that smooth look to it. It likes, variety and diversity. And by pulling up, these boulders don't look very big in here, but they're actually probably about 5 or 6 feet. So that creates habitat that wouldn't otherwise be there for rattlesnakes and spotted skunks and things of that nature that can move in and then utilize these areas. And also, when we do this work, when we clear out those invasive exotic species, we almost on every project, we see an immediate flush of species richness. There's just more biodiversity on these areas. And that benefits our native wildlife because you remove the non-native stuff. And all of a sudden, goldenrods and other asters and milkweed and poke and all of these other native species pop in there, which benefits pollinators throughout the 3 seasons. And our techniques are working on a lot of our projects, this is one of our sites 6 years after planting. That's Dr. Angel right there. What you see mostly in this photograph are the poplar, the black cherry, the locust, but also back over his shoulder, there's an American chestnut, and on the hillside in the background, there's some shortleaf pine. This is a site before Green Forest's work started. We were based on research. This is ripped ground in Martin County, Kentucky, where we were looking at, the results of this over time. So 19 years after planting, think about that 35-year-old site that I showed you earlier, where it's still just a grassland locked in that natural state of arrested natural succession. Here's a ripped site after 19 years. That's northern red oak that they're examining there. This is a sycamore that was planted that I'm examining. And in this area, the trees have gotten up, they've closed the canopy, and they're shading out the autumn olive and the other non-native species. We've got ferns moving into this area, mosses, lichens. There are mushrooms popping up everywhere. It's starting to act like a forest again. It's really quite amazing to see. And when you go out there, you always see like tree frogs and other things like that. It's wonderful just to see the return of nature. So from 2009 to 2022, we've had more than 400 projects or events across 10 states. We've utilized more than 17,000 volunteers in these efforts, teaching them about the benefits of forests to society, the benefits of individual species that they're planting, hoping that we'll foster the next generation of conservationists out there, and that they'll take some of the lessons learned at these events home with them and apply it throughout their lives. We've worked with hundreds of partners. We're part of the 1T.org community, which includes the Arbor Day Foundation, One Tree Planted, American Forests, and others, who globally want to plant and conserve 1 trillion trees by 2030. We're part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And we've reforested more than 6,500 acres through the planting of more than 4 million trees now. And we've invested millions of dollars into local economies, which is crucially important because it's seen throughout mining regions of the world, the same parallels with Appalachia, where you have higher poverty rates, higher income inequality rates, boom and bust economies in these regions. So putting money back into these regions for stability in a regenerative type of economy is crucially important, because for every $1 million that we invest in this work, it creates 39 full-time jobs. And that'll help to keep people in the region, and it'll help them take pride in their land, the land that's around them. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but some of the direct socioeconomic benefits of our work, we're looking, like I said, it was first a jobs program to improve the environment. So we're immediately creating employment for seed collectors, tree nursery workers, people working in greenhouses, equipment operators who are out there clearing the invasive species and ripping up the ground and building wetlands, things of that nature, as well as professional tree planters. But when we draw work into the region, we're also benefiting all of the secondary industries that are out there, retail, hospitality, transportation sectors, because they're out there spending in their stores and they might need parts and they go out for this and that and they're eating at the restaurants, staying at the hotels. So it really benefits more than just those who are directly benefited through this work. And we're also, like I said, trying to restore that forest-based economy. Before Appalachia was a coal-based economy, it was a forest-based economy, you know. So we're creating future economic opportunities through forest management. A lot of our sites, you may need to go back in and clear out invasive species, do vine removal, timber stand improvement, things of that nature. And eventually there will be timber production off of these sites. But in the meantime, people can go out there and harvest berries and things like that. On so many of our sites, we get blackberries and other things coming in naturally, elderberry, things of that nature. They can go out collecting mushrooms if they want to. I mean, there are a lot of non-timber forest products out there that people benefit from as well. And some of the landowners, we work on both public lands and private lands. So some of the private landowners may be able to benefit in the future by selling eco-asset credits off of these areas. We've had one landowner directly benefit in Ohio, where there's a company out in California looking to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus inputs to the Mississippi River Valley. And they were willing to purchase the reductions in credits that were going to come from his reforestation project. So if we could reduce the N and P runoff coming from his property, he could then sell his nitrogen and phosphorus reduction credits to them out there and get an economic benefit that way. And carbon markets. Right now, everybody's talking about carbon sequestration and carbon credits and, you know, tree planting. Seems like every time I turn on the TV, you know, somebody's got a new tree planting program out there. And they're looking to do carbon sequestration, get carbon offsets so that they can, you know, claim that they're net zero or whatever. So landowners who get these projects installed may be able to sell their carbon credits by locking these lands up as forest for the next 100 years or so. Also, there's potential for selling hunting leases off of these lands. And then tourism and recreation is a part of what we do as well. By beautifying these areas and putting the forest back, kind of removing some of these scars from the land, you know, people want to come out and see this. And for some of our projects, we work with recreations folks to build trails through the areas. And these are hiking trails, mountain biking trails. When we're working with the Forest Service, we're establishing campsites on there. So that can draw in tourists as well who might come out there. You know, just for passive recreation stuff like bird watching or watching the leaf change. You know, there are people who travel down the Appalachians to see the leaf change and things of that nature. Some more of the socioeconomic benefits continued. You know, it leads to an improved standard of living for the people throughout the region. By improving their water quality, if we can do enough of this work, they may not need to spend as much money treating the drinking water. So that'll lead to reduced tax bills down the road. But living in green spaces has been shown to improve people's sleep quality, as well as their mental and physical health. So this could lead to lower healthcare costs for people living in the region as well. And if you're not spending money on all of your expensive medical bills, you know, then you've got money to put into a vacation or something else, which is going to further benefit your mental health. So those are some other benefits that come from doing this work. And then there's all other opportunities that I just wanted to touch on that we're supportive of, that we don't directly engage in yet for the most part, but Dr. Angel talked about that, how silvopasture, for some operations, it can benefit the livestock to have free tree leaf fodder and tree fruit and nut crops as fodder for your livestock. It's not only going to benefit the ranchers and others. So we're supportive of, you know, some of the agroforestry proposals and silvopasture stuff going on out there. And also, you know, forest compatible agricultural commodity production. There are folks out there like Appalachia that are trying to start apple orchards on some of these surface mines. When I was a lunatic, undergraduate and graduate at UK, I always had these ideas of like, what can I do, you know, in this region? And I wanted to create strip mine wine because, you know, grape vineyards, you want sloped land for them. And I thought, a lot of these areas on these surface mines would be perfect for vineyards. We just need someone who's willing to take that lead and do that. And it's actually been done. I found out when discussing it with Dr. Sena and others when we were getting ready to submit a proposal that someone had created strip mine wine back in the 1970s. And that another extension agent here at UK had put in peaches and plums and apples and all kinds of fruit out there on the surface mine, hoping to get yield data off of it. But all of the locals came in and they kept rating it all, so he never got yield data off of it. And he got so mad at it because every year he'd come in to harvest his fruit and it's already gone by the locals. He bulldozed the whole thing. And I thought, well, he might have seen it as a failure, but Kenton and I didn't see it as a failure. We saw it as a smashing success because it showed that there's a demand for that. And it just takes people, with that vision and wanting to do that, to be able to produce these locally grown, nutritious foods for the community. We also work with Coal Country Bee Works, which was started by Dr. Tammy Horn at Eastern Kentucky University. You've probably heard about colony collapse disorder, how there's a big worry about what's going on with honeybee hives and those populations. In the Midwest, a lot of that is attributed to the pesticides that they're using for corn and beans and cotton and everything else that they're growing out there. Over here in Appalachia, you really don't have those big agricultural operations like that. So there's much lower baseline level of herbicides and insecticides and things out there. So the Appalachian region, would be great to develop this beekeeping cooperative. So we're supportive of all of these things that feed on the mines as well. So why forests? In Kentucky, there was a study done and there was $9.1 billion in direct economic contribution, about 28,000 jobs in the forestry industry, and nearly 60,000 jobs overall. And if you multiply that across Appalachia, it's tens of billions of dollars, tied up in the forestry industry. And there could be a lot more of that, So that's what we're looking to, is to help reestablish that forest-based economy and supplement, what's already going on. You all have probably seen this map on the left here. Have you all seen this one? No, not much. Okay. Well, this is a map that was put together. I say why Appalachia. This is a map that was put together of the Appalachian counties that are recognized by the Appalachian Regional Commission. It shows distressed and at-risk counties economically. And if you look at where our focal area is, these are our reforestation restoration projects throughout the region. The red ones of Eastern Kentucky and Western West Virginia is kind of the center of the distressed regions, of Appalachia. So by doing this, there's no one thing that's going to replace coal as it's on the decline. And as it continues to decline, as people are more and more worried about the effects of climate change, and renewables keep growing at the rate that they're growing. So we need opportunities out there for Appalachian citizens. And this is a part of that, what we're doing. But there's no one silver bullet to replace coal. But if we can help out economically throughout the region, anything that we can do is a good thing. This is a graph that shows coal mine employment in Kentucky, declining since, there was a recent peak there in the 1980s. Right now, it's at its lowest level, since it's the early 1900s, really. So finding employment opportunities and things that Appalachian citizens can do to stay within the region, that's a part of our mission as well. So like I said, we're supporting these industries. This is the Kentucky Division of Forestry's tree nursery in Eastern Kentucky and Morgan County, where they're lifting seedlings. We support these equipment operators as well, not only to rip up the land to remove invasive species, but to construct wetlands. We hire professional tree planters, some of them from outside of the region, drawing in resources, some of them from within the region. I said I would have dressed up today if I wasn't doing this right here. This is my rental truck a couple of years ago. That's what 10,200 seedlings looks like in the back of a rental pickup truck. This refrigerated 53-foot semi-trailer behind it can hold a few 100,000 seedlings. And that's what I'm tied up with and will be tied up with for the next month and a half or so, as we're trying to plant another 170 or 700,000 trees this year. We've already planted a couple of 100,000 here in Kentucky and West Virginia, and we're doing this on a daily basis. So I didn't want to wear my nice polo and pick up a tree planting bag and have it pour mud all over me, you know, and then I show up looking even worse than I do now. Part of the environmental education that we're doing, we have been contracting Appalachian Conservation for crews to come out as, you know, they're taking a break from their studies and things like that. They come and they work with professional foresters, U.S. Forest Service staff, others to help us with our ecological restoration projects. Here they're sowing native grasses and wildflowers to get, you know, warm season grasses and a pollinator mix established on one of the surface mines. This one's Monongahela. And they're also doing, you know, some of the wetland plantings for us as well, where we create all these wetlands throughout and we go in and plant, you know, wild raisin and high bush cranberry and all kinds of different things to restore that ecosystem. And then they've also been doing trail construction as a part of that recreation component. And that's really a big thing now, especially with COVID. You know, when COVID was going through, people in the cities were cooped up in their apartments. They were wanting to sell their apartments and get out and get back into nature. It's becoming a much bigger thing now, and people are starting to realize how important it is to have those green spaces and recreation areas around. So this is not the only one that we're working on. We're working on other ones as well to, you know, kind of parallel this and supplement it to create these recreation corridors. And just giving back, you know, we work, like I said, with all kinds of different groups. I mean, church groups, environmental clubs, K through 12 schools, just to teach people, you know, what we're doing and how they can get active. You know, we hope to inspire people to go out there and get active in their communities and, you know, make these changes, these transformative changes in the world, because there just aren't enough people out there active and doing these things. I mean, everywhere I drive, you know, now I'm a business manager for a nonprofit, but my passion is restoration ecology. And everywhere I look, I see opportunities for work. We need more people out there doing this kind of thing. So I'm thankful that you all are going to come out with us, you know, on Saturday. And I hope that you all go on to do more things, you know, throughout your own lives, because even in my non-professional life, I'm out doing this stuff as well. I'm working with my kids' school, getting them to do, you know, ecological restoration on their school grounds, some of the property that they manage, to build a mini arboretum, an outdoor classroom, because right now they're just wasting their time mowing it every year, you know, just mowing it over and over and over and over. And it's like, you know, that doesn't provide any shade when we're watching ball games or anything like that. I mean, we could get trees in here, have a mini arboretum, do all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot that can be done. It's just the way you look at it. And like I said, we're, you know, when I talked about this being paralleled in other mining regions of the globe, it really is. And prior to COVID hitting, we were working with one of our corporate contributors to expand this globally. And our first project was a pilot project in Australia on one of their coal surface mines over there. And we mirrored the Green Forests Work program of what we do here. We enlisted local schools to come out and plant eucalyptus trees with us. And it's the same objectives. You know, we're improving water quality inputs to the Chesapeake Bay or the Gulf of Mexico by what we're doing. Well, up there, it's the Fitzroy Basin, and they're worried about the Great Barrier Reef because of the bleaching events and things of that nature. So what they're wanting to do is create these riparian corridors in the headlands so that all the water flowing into the Great Barrier Reef areas are improved. So that was part of this. And it's also after the devastating brush fires of 2019 and 2020, they were thinking about the loss of their woodlands and koalas and everything else. So they're planting a mix of native eucalypt types on this surface mine here. And we were hoping to work in the Amazon as well. But that got shut down because of COVID. So it looks like perhaps we're doing more in Australia. This was just a small project where we planted about 4,000 trees. This year, they're probably planting trees, not as we speak, but 12 hours from now, they'll be planting trees again to plant about 200,000 trees as part of another project there. And we're working with that corporate sponsor of ours, Komatsu, to start a project in Indonesia as well, where they're trying to restore tropical forest types, but they're having really difficult problems with that. So I just wanted to end, you know, the date was kind of applicable here. You know, we're one day away from 59 years ago when I'm giving this presentation, but this is Rachel Carson. who wrote Silent Spring, about the loss of birds due to DDT. Really famous conservation book, kind of spearheaded the conservation movement of the 1960s that led to the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. But what she said was, man's attitude towards nature is today critically important simply because we have now acquired a faithful power to alter and destroy nature. But man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself. Now, I truly believe that we in this generation must come to terms with nature, and I think we're challenged as mankind has never been challenged before to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of nature, but of ourselves. And I think it's probably even more pertinent today than it was when she said that 59 years ago, because of what we now know is happening due to climate change and biodiversity loss and everything else. So I'll end on that note, and I'll open it up for questions and discussion. Are there any that are beyond reforestation? Like they're just too badly degraded? I don't think so, but I think that we may have to change our expectations of what we see as success. We may not be able to get the forest type that we want there, but if we select different species, then we can get a forest back. Like I've worked for a professional tree planting contractor that planted 4 to 5 million trees a year. And if we go out and plant white pine, and sycamore, and black locust, we know that we're going to get 90% survival or greater for all of those. And you will have a forest back, and you'll get some of the benefits of that forest. And we may have to do something like that for some of these highly degraded ones, like the one where you all are going to be planting. We've actually had difficulty getting the seedlings to survive there. It's been one of the most challenging sites that we've worked on. So we're putting in some species that are more tolerant because it's got an unusual soil type for the area. It's a heavier clay, and it's an acidic clay. So we think that there's probably a more robust microbial community there, leading to some root rot pathogens that's killing the trees. So we're going to, plant some sycamore in there and some sweet gum and some other things that we typically wouldn't plant, just to get a forest back on there so that we get some of the ecological benefits of having the forest there. And sweet gum occurs naturally in the region. But we always plant native trees. But, as far as being too degraded, we haven't run into anything like that yet, but we'll see. And I mean, there are some Superfund sites out there that probably are, but we don't work on any of those.
One more question.
Have y'all done any work on like pre-smoker sites, or you mostly focus on like places?
All right, so for the video out there, the question was, have we done any work on pre-smacker sites, the abandoned mine lands? We do supplement those efforts. The abandoned mine land programs are run by the individual states, and the money is allocated through a federal program. So the federal and state governments work together to tackle the abandoned mine land issues. You'll see one on Saturday when you're out planting with us, because right where we're going to be is a little AML project that they had there. We do supplement those efforts because while the active mining industry has to pay a certain amount of money for each ton of coal extracted that goes into the abandoned mine land fund to reclaim those areas, there's not enough money for all of the abandoned mine lands across the nation in that fund. So anything that we can do to help their efforts, we do that, and a lot of times we do. So they may have it written into their engineering plans where they'll do the forestry reclamation approach or the ripping or whatever, where otherwise it would have been, put to a grassland because they don't have the money for trees and planting labor. If we can come to the table with that and help them with it, we'll do that. And we've been, providing financial and technical support for abandoned mine land projects for, 5 or 6 years now, at least as long as I can remember, every year. And we're doing more this year as well.
Let's thank our speaker again. Michael's going to be out in the field running the project that we hope that on Saturday. if any questions, and we're only going to chat more. You feel free to just. If you didn't get a waiver, I got those here, and you can go ahead and hand in your signed waiver.
Did everybody get a report?
Grab a report, you can get one.
Get one? Everyone put them down?